The hotel clerk's words felt like a verdict echoing through the quiet lobby. Only one room left. 2 beds? No, 1 king. And the storm outside was tearing through downtown Chicago like it had something to prove. Michael Carter stood frozen, rainwater still dripping from his jacket, his 5-year-old son Jacob asleep against his shoulder upstairs in the banquet hall, where the corporate retreat had just ended in chaos. Then his boss, Victoria Hayes, turned to him with a calm, unreadable expression and said that since there was only 1 room left and they were both adults, it shouldn't be a problem. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, integrity, and second chances, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that character still matters. Michael wasn't just any employee. He was a single father who had rebuilt his life from the ashes of loss. 2 years earlier, his wife Hannah had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him with grief that felt like an anchor tied to his chest, and a little boy who asked every night why mommy couldn't come home. Chicago had never felt so cold, even in summer. Michael worked twice as hard after that, determined to prove that Jacob would never feel the absence of stability. He accepted overtime, traveled when required, and never complained, even when it meant bringing Jacob along to out-of-town conferences because he couldn't afford a sitter for multiple nights. Victoria Hayes was known throughout the company as sharp, composed, and unapproachable. At 38, she had climbed the ladder faster than anyone expected, leading one of the fastest-growing tech firms in Illinois. Rumors followed her like shadows, that she was ruthless, that she didn't tolerate weakness, that she fired people without blinking. Michael had always kept his distance, speaking only when necessary, ensuring his work spoke louder than his circumstances. The retreat in Chicago was supposed to be simple, a strategy weekend at a luxury hotel overlooking Lake Michigan. But an unexpected blizzard had rolled in early, grounding flights and filling every hotel room in the city within hours. Employees scrambled to find accommodations. Michael had planned to drive home with Jacob that evening, but the roads were closing fast. When the front desk announced there was only 1 room left, silence fell like a heavy curtain. Victoria had looked at him steadily, her tone practical. She wasn't suggesting anything inappropriate, she was stating a logistical fact. They were both professionals, adults. The storm would pass by morning. It was logical, sensible. But Michael's heart pounded for a different reason. It wasn't about impropriety, it wasn't about gossip, it was about the line he had drawn in his life after Hannah's death. A quiet promise that Jacob would never see him compromise his values or blur boundaries, no matter how harmless it appeared. His son was upstairs in that hall, curled up in a borrowed coat, and Michael knew children noticed more than adults realized. He imagined Jacob waking up in a strange hotel room, seeing his father sharing a bed, even an innocent one, with his boss. He imagined the questions, the confusion, the subtle erosion of the example he was trying so hard to set. So he did something Victoria never expected. He declined, calmly, respectfully. He thanked her for the offer, but said he and Jacob would manage in the lobby for the night if necessary. Victoria stared at him, shocked not by rejection but by conviction. She was used to people bending for convenience. She was used to ambition outweighing principle. No one had ever chosen discomfort over proximity to power. Michael carried Jacob back downstairs, settling into an armchair near the fireplace. The lobby lights dimmed as the night deepened. Snow battered the tall glass windows. He wrapped his coat around his son and stayed awake, watching the storm rage outside. It wasn't pride that kept him there. It was peace. The kind that comes from knowing you chose the harder right over the easier wrong. Around midnight, Victoria came down. She had taken the room, but something had unsettled her. She stood across the lobby for a long moment, observing the scene. The exhausted father, the sleeping child, the quiet dignity. Something inside her shifted. Victoria hadn't grown up with that kind of stability. Her father had been charming but unreliable, promising things he rarely delivered. She had learned early that success was safer than relationships, that achievement couldn't abandon you. Watching Michael, she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, respect untainted by fear. Without making a spectacle, she spoke with the manager and arranged for the hotel's small conference suite to be opened. It wasn't a bedroom, but it had couches that could be pushed together. She returned to Michael and told him another space had become available for him and Jacob. There was no pride in her voice, no insistence, just quiet acknowledgement. Michael hesitated, then accepted. Not because it was comfortable, but because it didn't compromise his boundaries. He carried Jacob upstairs again, laying him gently across the makeshift bed. As he watched his son sleep, he felt a strange sense that something significant had shifted. Not in his career, but in the invisible currents of respect between him and his boss. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving Chicago blanketed in white. Employees gathered in the lobby, whispering about delays. Victoria stood before them, composed as ever. But when her eyes found Michael, there was something different, not authority, but recognition. Weeks later, back at the office, a major leadership position opened. It required integrity under pressure, the ability to prioritize long-term trust over short-term gain. Many assumed Victoria would choose someone with flashier credentials. Instead, she promoted Michael. In her announcement, she spoke about character, about leadership not being defined by convenience but by consistency. She didn't reference the storm or the hotel, but everyone sensed the story beneath her words. Michael didn't celebrate loudly. He drove home that evening, picked Jacob up from daycare, and took him for ice cream near Navy Pier. Watching his son laugh with chocolate smeared across his face, Michael realized the promotion wasn't the true reward. The true reward was knowing that when faced with a quiet test of integrity, he had passed. Not for his boss, not for the company, but for the little boy who would one day understand. Victoria, meanwhile, found herself reconsidering the walls she had built around her own life. She began mentoring employees differently, asking about their families, listening instead of commanding. Michael's choice had unsettled her assumptions about strength. She realized that power without principle was hollow. Years later, when Jacob was old enough to ask about that snowy night in Chicago, Michael told him the truth. He explained that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones no one else sees, but those are the ones that shape who you become. Jacob listened carefully, absorbing a lesson that would outlive any corporate title. Life didn't become perfect. There were still deadlines, still lonely evenings, still memories of Hannah that caught Michael off guard. But there was also steady growth, deeper respect, and a sense that integrity had quietly rewritten the course of more than one life that night. If this story touched your heart even a little, please take a second to like the video, share it with someone who believes character still matters, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly defines a person. And before we close, I have one special request. Comment the word integrity below if you believe doing the right thing is always worth it. Because sometimes the most shocking choice isn't the one that breaks boundaries, it's the one that protects them. And in a world that often rewards shortcuts, a single father in a snowstorm proved that quiet strength can change everything.